Creative Inquiry Project by Norah Anderson. My student is a female who is 7 years old. She repeated kindergarten and is now in first grade. My first impression of my student was that she seemed quiet, depressed, and withdrawn from the rest of the class. My mentor teacher communicated to me that the main problem my student was having involved reading, especially with decoding words and identifying high-frequency sight words. She also believed that most of these problems stemmed from a lack of confidence in the student. When I asked my mentor teacher to provide me with information on test scores for my student, she gave me this data. On the STAR test, my student was ranked in the 49th percentile, and on the MAP test, she ranked in the 71st percentile. This would show that the student is about in the middle of the class. However, my mentor teacher did not find this to be an accurate representation of the student's knowledge and ability. Three goals were set for my student. These were to improve decoding skills when reading decodable words, learn high-frequency sight words, and build the student's confidence in herself. The intervention plan, based on the goals that were set for the student, is as follows. Provide meaningful activities which will build upon the student's ability to decode and recognize a list of words that she is struggling to read, as well as build her confidence in that ability in a setting where she feels comfortable and safe. My mentor teacher gave me a list of 48 words which my student was unable to read that she wanted me to work with her on throughout the course of the semester. The first activity that we accomplished was a matching game. I took the 48 words which my mentor teacher had given me and created a set of matching cards. I would place the cards face down and have my student flip over the cards until she found a match. Once she found a correct match, she would have to read the word to me. This activity encouraged reading the 48 words in a fun and engaging way, which is very developmentally appropriate. Also, brain research tells us that when the fun stops, learning often stops too. Dr. Spears suggested to me that I try the 3-period lesson with my student. So for my second activity, I did just that. To show how it would work, I'll use an example with the word only. For the first period in the lesson, I would say, "This is only," and have my student trace it and say it. For the second period of the lesson, I would say, "Show me only," and have my student point to the word only. And finally, for the third period of the lesson, I would point to one of the 3 cards and say, "What is this?" The 3-period lesson is very developmentally appropriate because it applies so many different learning styles. It applies visual learning, auditory learning, linguistic learning, and kinesthetic learning, all in one lesson. Also, the 3-period lesson is found to be a more effective method of teaching vocabulary. I believe it's also an effective method for teaching reading. For the third activity, I had my student create sentences by looking at a word on an index card and orally coming up with a sentence about that word. I found this activity to be my student's favorite of them all. She loved being creative with the words and making them meaningful to her own life. Doing this is very developmentally appropriate. Also, research suggests that superior learning takes place when classroom experiences are enjoyable and relevant to students' lives, interests, and experiences. I began to notice that my student was having a difficult time reading words with a sneaky E on the end. So I found an activity that would help her accomplish this. First, she would read the CVC word on the page. Then she would add an E to the end and read the new CVCE word. This activity worked wonders in helping her understand what sneaky E did to the vowel sound. Although this activity is printed on a page, I don't think it's considered a worksheet. Number one, it's child-sized. It's also colorful, interactive, and very visual, which makes it developmentally appropriate. Also, a large body of research indicates that visual clues help us to better retrieve and remember information, which makes it research-based. I began to notice that my student had a difficult time differentiating between the letters B and D. Therefore, for my fifth and final activity, I found a board game that would help her master that skill. To do this, she would roll the dice, land on a B or a D, and then she would have to name the letter and the sound that it makes. After enough tries, this did help her learn the skill of differentiating between B and D. Once again, this activity is developmentally appropriate because it's fun and engaging for students. Research shows that when classroom activities are pleasurable, the brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter that stimulates the memory centers and promotes the release of acetylcholine, which increases focused attention. For the first assessment of my student, I assessed my student's ability to read each word in the context of a sentence. I created sentences for my student to read using the 48 words that we had been studying throughout the course of the semester. I had a copy and she also had a copy. I placed a check mark if the word was read correctly and an X if the word was read incorrectly. The second assessment I conducted with my student assessed my student's ability to read each word isolated from the context of a sentence. I would hold up an index card and have my student read it. These index cards were comprised of the 48 words which we've been studying throughout the semester. Once she read the word, I would place each index card in a different pile, depending on if she read it correctly or incorrectly. Words were considered correct if read correctly. Words were also considered correct when the student self-corrected. For the purposes of this assessment, there was no time limit set for the student to read a word correctly. Words were considered incorrect if the student read them incorrectly. Words were also considered incorrect if the student said, "I do not know what that word is." The results of the assessments are as follows. In Assessment 1, my student read 37 of the 48 words correctly, and in Assessment 2, she read 28 of the 48 words correctly. I believe it was a lot easier for my student to read the words in the context of sentences. Overall, my students struggled decoding long words and also reading words with long vowel sounds. My mentor teacher and I both noticed that my student improved significantly in recognizing sight words, had an improved ability to differentiate between B and D, also had an improved ability to apply phonetic patterns when decoding words, and finally, a major increase in confidence. To close, I would like to share my thoughts about the experience. First off, what would I do differently? I would spend more time on mastering one skill instead of trying to develop multiple skills. I would also use more repetition in activities. What did I learn? I learned that one-on-one time working with a student is extremely beneficial, and also that assessment is crucial in knowing where a student needs improvement. And finally, what did I gain? I gained a meaningful experience working one-on-one with a student, a sense of accomplishment, and most importantly, a friend. Thanks for watching.